Do you think that Trump understands kind of the high level game theory around this, like around the first mover advantage? He may not understand all the nuances of Bitcoin, but do you think he gets that game theory? Like, or is it just he's got people in his ear? They're telling him this is what we need to do. You made this promise. Okay, I'll sign it. I'll do it. How deep do you think that knowledge goes?
Well, I would give him some credit that he understands the game theory of it. As for Bitcoin and the implications of everything he's done, I don't think he fully understands it. If you look at the signing of the EO, it's David Sachs answering his questions, and he's like, did I promise this? You believe in it? You think it's good? I'll sign it. Right? That doesn't sound like a Michael Saylor level of conviction and understanding to me, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I think he definitely does understand there is a first mover advantage. And I definitely think he knows that the goal is to become a Bitcoin superpower, because you want as much of the valuable thing that everyone else wants soon. So that's definitely a given. So I guess that's the answer.
Do you foresee any, let's say, geopolitical games being played between gold and Bitcoin as it relates to neutral reserve asset status? I.e., is there any bait and switch that happens where, okay, a lot of foreign central banks have been accumulating gold for some time. They haven't been accumulating Bitcoin. Who knows how much gold's in Fort Knox? Hopefully most of it, we'll see. But how do you see that interplay playing out? Because basically there's two candidates for neutral reserve asset, right? It's Bitcoin, it's digital gold, or it's analog gold. How do you see that shaking out?
I think it has a lot to do with how the audits of Fort Knox goes, or if there is an audit. If the audit comes back that there is not enough gold, the gold's not all there, I believe we'll see this sort of game play out where gold is demonetized in favor of Bitcoin, simply for that reason that you outlined. I think Saylor said the same thing, that you can kind of like take out your enemies that have been buying gold by dumping gold and buying Bitcoin, especially if you have more Bitcoin, right? So it's just a balance. Like, does the US have more Bitcoin or more gold? And do they see the Bitcoin as more valuable or the gold as more valuable? And I think another thing that we forgot to talk about the EO was this will now allow us to actually figure out exactly how much Bitcoin the US has, because there's a number that's often thrown out there of 200 to 220,000 Bitcoin. 95,000 is going back to Bitfinex, and the rest we don't know. The US Marshals have kind of said we don't know. So the biggest thing I think for the EO is really that we're going to find out exactly how much they have, and that might lead to us finding out how much everyone else has, because every number out there is largely an estimate or approximation. Because China too, like right now, in if you're going by general public disclosures, the U.S. has less than China. China has 194,000. But there are also theories that China sold it, because there are some announcements in Chinese news that they disposed of some crypto assets. They didn't say Bitcoin, but they said we will dispose so much $1 billion of yuan, and this much billions of yuan, and this department will dispose this much. But we don't know. But if the U.S. comes out and says, here's our attestation, here's a signed message from the key that controls this, then I think other countries will start to need to verify how much they have. Otherwise, you don't really believe that at this point. Trust in government is at an all-time low globally. So I think there will be a race for more transparency, which is good for everybody.
That's a really interesting thing to think about, because it's also, you can't really do that with gold, but with Bitcoin, it's like, oh no, it's very easy. We'll verify it here for you in 5 minutes. Like you said, here's the signed message. This is the address. Like, go on, have a look. Check on your own node if you would like. Nothing's stopping you. That's a really radical shift, though. I mean, is that one of those things where you think this is one of the ways that, let's say, the ethos of Bitcoin, if I can say that, starts bleeding into governments? Like, really, I mean, that's radical transparency, right? We're not used to that from governments. Certainly not from any governments recently.
Yeah, I think so, because the whole point of this stuff is soft power projection, right? And projection of economic power. you kind of want people to know how much gold you have, right? Generally. And like you said, you can't really prove how much gold you have, and we actually don't know. So this is a very simple, low cost, highly effective way to prove how much Bitcoin you have. And it's going to be the norm, I think, that every country is going to say, here's our holdings. Look at how powerful we are.
Do you think from another side of this, one of the tropes that folks like, Elizabeth Warren threw out there was, this is going to be used for sanctions evasion. So the effectiveness of U.S. sanctions on countries that get on our bad side is going to be lessened by Bitcoin. And she's been saying this for years. Is that something that you think is a legitimate concern for policymakers in Washington? Is that something that they're considering, or is that just kind of secondary to the fact that this is as you said, about soft power projection and holding the only truly finite and verifiable asset on the planet?
Yeah, I mean, with money being information now because of Bitcoin, it's really hard to enforce. Like, capital controls are also gone, right? They've been gone for 16 years now with the dawn of Bitcoin, but that's not really talked about. You still pretend that capital controls exist, but are capital controls effective? That's a question you have to ask yourself, because there's a lot of Chinese-owned real estate in the U.S. Like, how'd that money get there? With you can only send $50,000 out per year, right? Under the current capital control scheme. So are they that effective? Are sanctions that effective? How hurt is Russia from being sanctioned to hell? I don't know. I don't think they're that effective. So it's a tool I believe that politicians like to wave around and say, yeah, we'll sanction you, but does it really work? I don't think so. So does it really matter at this point if you have permissionless money? And that reduces the threat of a sanction that doesn't work. You have to draw your own conclusion from that.
I'm curious too, okay, let's say, governments start to get behind this. The U.S. already is, obviously, to a certain extent, with this EO and these other draft bits of legislation that have been submitted again. Do you think we see central bank pushback? Do you think we see, folks like, not just the United States Federal Reserve, but other kind of U.S. controlled institutions like the IMF, like the World Bank, even the BIS for, the Bank of Banks? Do you think they have not been big friends to Bitcoin in the past? Are they going to view this as kind of an acceleration of the threat? How do you think that plays out?
All of those institutions are definitely going to fight back, because you're cutting off their livelihood, right? Like, they are sort of like central banks. They can print their own money. The IMF with the special drawing rights, right? That's basically printed money. So, like, when we talk about money printing, it's not just like physical printing of bills. Like, all of this is printing of money, right? It's increasing the money supply everywhere. And yeah, it's their you're cutting off their job, so they're going to hate it, really. So I don't really see any way around that. You have these institutions that are very entrenched, very influential and powerful, and you're kind of chopping off their ability to do what they do. So they're going to fight it until the end. But if you're talking about just central banks, I think there really has to be a moment of reckoning where you ask the people there, like, are you thinking about this for your own benefit or for the benefit of the country? And if it is for the benefit of the country, they have to acknowledge that they need Bitcoin and they should just hold Bitcoin. They can still exist and just, do whatever they want to do, but, they should hold Bitcoin, right? And pretend to manage monetary policy and inflation. But for the other ones, like the IMF and World Bank, I think it's a much more difficult battle, because they're not really accountable to anybody, right? It's like a collective group that funds them, and they have no accountability whatsoever.